Okay, I think that we are live right now. Okay, we are. Hi. In this presentation, I will be discussing about the internal family system, how this framework can help us move towards purpose in life, reconnect with our intuition, and just learn stuff about ourselves that we are unaware of, just talents, skills, our destiny. So in the first part, I will be discussing about the three planes of reality. Then I will identify where purpose fits in this picture, where does soul, where does intuition fit. And finally, I really want to focus on what purpose entails and how can we use the internal family systems framework to our benefit? Discover those parts of ourselves that we stay hidden. So, the first part, what are the three planes of reality? Well, I think many of us are aware that what we see is not the only thing. There is more to life, more to our experience than just the material, physical things. I'll go to my drawing board to illustrate this in more detail. So let's say I have three planes, as mentioned. So here is one. Here is the second one. So on the first plane, that's what I would call the, let's say, physical plane. And as I mentioned, this is what we all share, experience. This is where I would talk about our physical body, what we can touch, feel, objects, for example, the camera that I'm using to film right now, maybe planets like the sun, houses. I think you get the point. So the physical is what everybody doesn't argue with. Now, the plane underneath that is the spiritual realm, which differs with each individual. What do I mean by that? Well, in the spiritual realm, we kind of can talk about thoughts, emotions, so happy face and sad face. These all exist, and this is also something that we don't really argue with. It is a very common experience. However, if we go further down the list of what exists in the spiritual realm, it kind of changes with each person because for somebody, the spiritual realm might also have chakras. Other people who see these energy centers in our spiritual body, maybe meridians, which are energy channels, so roads that kind of intersect in different ways and they connect with our physical organs and our spiritual body. So I want to clarify that when I talk about spiritual body, I mean what exists in the spiritual realm. So it houses the chakras, it houses the meridians, it houses our thoughts, our emotion, it also houses our personalities, and many more. The list goes on. So I also wanted to mention that the IFS system that I'll be talking about talks about parts of ourselves. So we can also put this as a concept in the spiritual realm parts of self. I will delve into this at the end of my presentation. Finally, what is the foundation of everything? There are many words that describe this. It can go from unconscious to the unknown to life force to divine to God, soul. In my presentation, I will just write soul or conscious. This presentation really is going to focus how purpose that also exists in the spiritual realm can be discovered. And in order to explain this, I wanted to touch upon this one core concept when we look at all of these three planes stacked this way. There is also a highway of messages between the three planes. What do I mean by that? Well, your body sends signals to your thoughts. Your thoughts send signals to your body. And the soul sends signals to your thoughts and perhaps also to the physical realm. And your physical realm also sends signals to your soul. And the same thing with the spiritual realm. I really want you to imagine that there is this constant messaging happening between all of these realms. It's not just, for example, here I am in the physical realm, and I react to an environmental stimuli. For example, I react to the sun shining on my face. And then this stimuli creates an emotion, feeling of happiness, of content. And then this emotion motivates me towards action, which is standing still and enjoying the sun, or sunbathing, whatever it can be. This loop where we respond, so how can I make this better? The arrows. Let's say here I am. So I respond to environmental stimuli. This creates thoughts. The thoughts create or also creates emotions. Then the emotions motivate me to do a specific behavior. So behavior, which is standing still and enjoying the sun. And this is kind of the first interaction that we know of that gets explained a lot in psychology. That's kind of how we interpret our world. But there's another one that starts from the spiritual realm that many of us kind of forget. For example, we have the spiritual body that gives us stimuli. This then triggers an internal change. So, for example, our chakras actually give us a stimuli. This in turn triggers an internal change. So we feel an emotion, and then this emotion creates an action in the physical realm. And then this action responds and influences our chakras. Giving a practical example, our root chakra, that has our survival instinct, reproduction at its core. It's starting, or it sends, let's say, energy into our spiritual body. When it's really activated, for example, we are maybe in love, or we are really interested in finding a partner in life. So this will create feelings of love, um, feelings of maybe social, becoming social. Then this will motivate a behavior, going out to parties, meeting with others. And this whole behavior will influence our root chakra. It will send feedback that we are using the energy how it is meant to be used, and it will create a sense of coherence, of harmony. This kind of brings up the can of worms of what is actually chakras. What am I really talking about? But I didn't really want to go into that in this presentation. This is just meant to show another perspective that many of us forget, how targeting our spiritual realm can also influence our environment. It's not just the actions that we make in the environment that create the opportunities, the positive or negative events that happen. It's also our spiritual body that influences what type of events come in our life. That's really what I wanted to focus here, where we don't control our life with action. There's also chakras, meridians, different spiritual layers that influence our life's path. But enough said of that jargon. Let's really get into why this is important for you to understand, because in the next part, I'll be talking about purpose. And I'll be talking about purpose from the spiritual realm. Now, I'm not denying that purpose has physical outcomes, that perhaps if you live life with purpose, you will find materialistic success. But I don't want that to be a rule, because it might happen and it might not. What I want you to really think of the rule for purpose is that when you live with purpose, you will feel, so we're talking about emotional states here in the spiritual realm, you will feel a certain degree of fulfillment, of peace, of harmony, of love, all of these positive emotions that we want to cultivate. So let's go into purpose. I mentioned it is an emotional state where we feel we are making a meaningful impact in the world and are using our talents, skills, interests to the best of our ability. So this brings up two concepts: world and ability. Now, why do I bring up the concept of the world? Because we're social creatures. We're not born in life to stay in our bubble, to live by ourselves. We are born to share experience, to share our knowledge, to live in a community. And part of purpose is discovering our role in the community. This is also how we can develop genuine connection with others and feel the sense of camaraderie, this friendship, that we're all living life together in some ways. Now, the second, which is a bit more of a complex concept, is what do I mean by using our talents, skills, interests to the best of our ability? What I'm talking about here is realizing potential. And potential is twofold. It is number one, our destiny. The talents that we're born with, the interests that we're born with, we don't choose them. It's the spiritual body, the layer that existed before we came out of the womb. Let's just say that. And destiny is really our mission in life to create a specific change in the world. It can be negative or positive. Most of us want a positive impact on the world, but just to clarify, it means we are here with a higher reason, a higher mission to complete. Caveat to this is that it's not this big grand thing, maybe. It just means that we're not here to do for the sake of doing. We are here to move our collective world, everyone in this world, towards a specific direction. What is that? That is a different presentation. Maybe another day I might go into that. And the second thing that realizing potential talks about, so destiny, but also decreasing the inner conflict that we're born with. What I mean by that is when we're born, we kind of separate ourselves into two parts: our good parts and our bad parts, our strengths, our weaknesses, the positive aspects of us, and our flaws. And then there's this constant tension where we just want to focus on our good parts. We just want to focus on our strengths. We kind of forget about our weaknesses. We want to hide them because our weaknesses, that's what makes us fail. That's what gives us these obstacles. So there's this constant tension inside of us that we live with. And the point of realizing potential is that by fixing imbalances, problems in life that we're destined to work on, we enter this flow state where this inner conflict doesn't exist, where our good parts and our bad parts are the same thing. We just don't care. An example of this is when you are really into solving somebody's problem that they've come to you with. I'm thinking of, in my case, a person comes because they feel lost and they don't know what to do with their life. And I feel I'm in this flow state when I start drawing the birth chart, the astrological birth chart. I start looking at the numerology. Time passes, and I don't really care about my insecurities, about my weaknesses. Everything is at the same level. I enter this flow state where I'm not worrying about, am I doing a good job or am I not doing a good job? The only thing that I'm focusing on is solving this problem, really getting to the crux of it. So that's what I mean by flow state, where all of our parts are from the same soup. Now, this kind of moves us towards the destiny part, where I said, well, we're born with specific talents, we're born with specific skills, and we are destined to solve problems, specific problems in life. The question is, well, what are these problems that I'm destined to solve, that I'm destined to be the best at solving? Here is my solution to that. Ask yourself these poignant questions. What are my interests? What problems do I stumble upon often in life? Try to really think of one or two or three. There's usually a pattern that comes up with your life. What friends, family, coworkers come to you for help? And finally, ask yourselves, what problems do I find easy to solve? So these questions are really focusing on who you are. The second set of questions is focusing on the world. What are the current pain points? And which problems need a solution right now? When you've figured out what the world needs, then all that is left to do is match what you are destined to be good at with what the world needs to be solved right now. However, it's not this simple because maybe you tried this, but you didn't really have an idea that came to mind. Or even if you tried the other way, which is through elimination, you focus on what you dislike, you focus on the problems that you are bad at solving, it still doesn't give you a practical solution, a guide, a plan in order to figure out what to do with my life. How do I get to purpose? And so I really wanted to kind of discuss in what are these obstacles that are not allowing you to follow purpose that easily? Because you ask yourself these questions, you come up with some answers, but still, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't click. I want to figure out what my purpose is, but I can't make sense of what I'm getting at. And this comes up with the really important aspect of life, which is intuition. But before that, I wanted to hone into the obstacles to following purpose. I believe that there may be two that I want to focus on today. Number one is maybe actually you do have an idea of what your purpose is. So to give yourself another chance, what I tell in my videos a lot is to ask yourself this question. If I had abundance, if money and time were unlimited, what would I be doing right now? And so analyze what is the idea that comes to you. Now, even if you have this idea that came to you, either you asked yourself the abundance question or you asked all of the other, what are my interests, those very poignant questions, you still might hesitate and feel lost because you're faced with an emotion of fear. You are afraid to pivot because there's no guarantee of success. It's kind of risky. And then this begs the question, well, how do I overcome this fear? Through intuition. Now, the second one, an obstacle to following our purpose, is when we really actually don't feel intuition in our daily life, or we don't act upon it as much as we could. We are acting based on physical stimulus instead of spiritual stimulus. And this usually is the case of having suppressed a lot of emotions throughout our adulthood. I kind of brought a lot of concepts right now: intuition, suppressing emotions, having no guarantee, the risk. And how does this all kind of connect and bring the internal family systems into play? So let's just really hone down onto the intuition part. Now, when I talk about intuition, which is individual, I really want you to think of it as being a happy, cheerful messenger. It is here to help you, it is here to guide you. Now, the problem with this happy, cheerful messenger is that how well it gets to you, how well it reaches you, depends on the roads. How well are the roads that it has to travel to get to your mind cleaned, without potholes, without a blockade, for example, without a tree that has fallen over onto the road, and the messenger now has to think of, how do I get over this big obstacle? In practical terms, what do I mean by these obstacles? Well, number one, there is a lot of emotional junk that we have left on these roads that the messenger is having a hard time getting over, a hard time overcoming them. Because they just kind of block its path. So this this conflict, or this problem that the intuition has in reaching us and giving us this insight that it so desperately wants to give us, can be felt in two ways. Number one, we feel in our daily life that we lack intuitive signals. We actually have no idea where we move towards. And if we ask ourselves, when is the last time that I really felt maybe a gut feeling or a nudge or a pull? I can't really recollect, or maybe once in a week. That means that we really lack the information from intuition. So it's not managing to get to us. The second way that we can feel, which is more my case, we have too much. We see too many signals, and we just feel like an overload with information that has no substance. I kind of can grasp some insights here and there, but what am I supposed to do with this? How do I make sense of it? Where is the plan that will put my life into shape and move towards purpose? This would be more of the messenger that kind of gets to us, but it gets to us like too late, and it already has 5 other messages at the same time. And then you're sitting there wondering, well, what am I supposed to do with all of this bunch of information? At the end of the day, it's kind of useless. So these both problems of our messenger can be solved through emotional processing. Now, yes, this brings up the big thing that nobody wants to really admit. Emotional processing, feeling our emotions, not suppressing them, and kind of getting through our childhood traumatic memories. So, why do we want to do this? Simply because if we clean out the noise, so the mental habits that we have learned from past traumatic experiences that make us recreate problems that don't exist in life, and that warp our perception of reality into something that it is not, then finally we will be able to clean the path for intuition so that A, it can get to us, and B, that it can get there faster. not, kind of stay stuck with three messages at the end. But when it gets a message, immediately it gets sent to our mind and we can receive it. So childhood trauma. It's the kind of emotional junk that often we are stuck with. And here, the internal family systems is really interesting in how we can heal this. Because what happens is that if we use this framework, the traumatic experience gets stored into memory. And this is called the exiled part, which holds the emotional experience of either the fear, the anger, hurt, shame, into a bottle that it closes the lid on and puts it into our shelf. And it holds it for future resolution when we feel ready to process these emotions. Because here is one rule of life that maybe you don't want to miss or you don't want to avoid, which is when we see a problem, we will solve it, no matter what. Our mind is a chronic problem solver. It sees an imbalance, it wants to balance it out. Now, what the solution is different in situations. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually supposed to fix something physically, right? It can just mean through, for example, meditation, you regulate your breathing. That's fixing already an imbalance. If your breathing is too shallow or you're starting to panic and you employ a breathing technique to balance your breathing out into a normal, calm state, that already is fixing a problem. So don't think that again, this has to be this big solution. It could be very simple. But the essence is that we are chronic problem solvers. We are not here on life to avoid things. We are here to fix balances. We're doers. That's kind of how I want you to imagine your life. But it's very hard. Because there are certain experiences in life that just shock our system too much. And when we're unable to solve that problem, so assuming that the traumatic experience is a problem, when we're unable to find and discover this solution that will balance out this experience, we take all of that emotional energy and put it into a bottle and store it for later resolution. That's what's called an exiled part, a wounded part. Now, what happens is that because our present life has a lot of similarities with our past, we are constant pattern recognizing creatures as well. We have these protective parts that come up in order to protect ourselves from the exiled parts. What I mean is that these protective parts are compulsive actions, so behaviors that suppress our emotions. They can be proactive behaviors, for example, OCD tendencies, really extreme planning, people pleasing, or reactive tendencies. These are more maybe that show addictive behaviors, raging, these kinds of behaviors. Now, the thing is that both of these parts, the protector parts that are suppressing the exile parts and the exile parts, are not going to come up with the right time when you are ready to solve the issue, to heal. It kind of has to come from your own initiative. And so what happens is that if we kind of forget, and we usually end up going headfirst into suppressing emotions, just doing, eventually what ends up is that we've built a lot of traumatic memory that is unresolved. And then this creates a life where we, most of the time, are living from the past instead of the present. Why is this a problem? Simply because if we live from the past, we are, as I mentioned, recreating past problems into our present, where actually they don't exist. It's the classic example of bringing baggage to the table. You had a traumatic experience with your parents, your siblings, somebody close to you in your past. And then you find yourself one day in the supermarket, in the grocery, or on the street, and something reminds you of this experience, and bam, you have triggered either self-criticism, you have triggered either anger, you have triggered either just maybe a depressive episode. Whatever it might be, something from the past comes up and you create a problem. Now, this is very, very frustrating, and it really becomes a block for not just simply discovering success in our life, but for our intuition. Because our intuition wants to have this highway towards our mind to be clean. Because you never know when it has an important message. But if every time there is some kind of stump or a big mountain of crappy negative stuff just blocks it, it really starts to get frustrating. It can't do its job properly, and it fuels our feelings of resentment, of regret, and just dissatisfaction in general. So the solution is to, as I said, clean up the highways, remove that emotional junk. Now, there are many ways to do this, but one that I've personally used myself is to talk with these protector and exiled parts. Now, the goal is to induce memory reconsolidation, a fancy word for changing often the negative or very black and white conclusion that we have learned from this traumatic experience into a neutral one, which forces us to look at the other perspective, see the other side of the coin. In practical terms, what does this mean? It means holding our negative emotions and positive emotions at the same time. For example, yes, this person when I was a kid really hurt me. Disrespected my boundaries. Whatever it may be. And I learned that maybe setting boundaries is important. That maybe I'm stronger than I think I am. Okay, this person said mean things to me, but that doesn't define who I am. I know who I am. I am XYZ. Healthy ego, healthy identity in some sense. So let's dive into the exercise. So the first is to get a quiet space. Give yourself at least half an hour. I would say minimum. And just sit comfortably, maybe in your bed, maybe in a chair, inside or outside. And get into a meditative posture, which just means notice how you feel, your thoughts, your bodily sensations, the tension that you're already with. And notice how you're also interacting with your environment in the moment. You know, your thoughts will dart to there. Oh, I see this. Oh, I forgot about this. And if you have these thoughts that come up and you have these emotions, kind of just think of them as a flowing river. Where yes, you have this thought, you have this emotion. Oh yes, I did forget this. But just allow it. Just kind of see it flow by. When you finally have entered this calm state, I want you to bring up a mild, small, uncomfortable memory. Now, I'm not saying go into your trauma. Only do that if you feel you are ready, but just to see how this works. Just try with an uncomfortable memory. And it doesn't really have to be childhood. Anything that you view as a problem, as discomfort, your brain, your mind will want to solve it, to bring it back into balance. So when you bring up this memory, often what will happen is that you can't really access the exiled part. A protector will come up. This protector's job is to, suppress the exiled part. So it is natural that you will first be greeted with that protector. And what I want you to do is notice how this protector shows up, or in exiled if you manage to get the exiled part. Again, notice how it feels in your body, what emotion, what thought comes up. And maybe to best kind of keep this observational stance, you want to personify this part, either with a color, with a shape, with an object, with a character, with a person. Finally, you want to really acknowledge it and sit with it. Now, this depends how fast you will move forward. If you are not new to meditation, feeling just being with an emotion or emotions will kind of be easier for you. So you might just naturally find a stance where you're feeling the negative emotion, the negative thoughts, the negative behavior that this protector part is stuck with at the same level as any positive emotion. So when this protector part comes up, or exiled part, don't try to argue with it or suppress it. Just let it be there. And then you kind of want to invite communication. You want to ask it, do you have a specific message for me? So if you feel pulled towards something, allow your mind to just follow that path. Really, the most important is to allow your intuition um, to guide you towards where you want to go with this protector. It might bring you back towards childhood memory. It might bring you towards an unmet need that you're not aware of. It might bring you towards a part of your identity that is really important for you. And that, again, you have kind of forgotten about. Or it might bring up parts of you that you find are insecurities, the bad parts. And again, through this whole process, you don't really want to be judging. You want to just allow yourself to be guided like a curious student. Now, how well you can do it, it depends on how traumatic the memory is, how emotionally stable you feel throughout the day, how well your meditative practice is. At the end of the day, what this exercise really helped me is to hold both the negative emotion and squeeze out a positive emotion out of it. Because I believe that the universe is friendly in some ways. And however painful and unjust that experience was, which is true, probably would have happened in any case because of X, Y, and Z. And that really is something that each person has to come to terms throughout their own life. Because this trauma moved me towards psychology, for example. Because this trauma moved me towards helping a specific set of people. That's kind of what we're trying to create here. A neutral perspective where both positive and negative coexist. So at the end of the day, when you go about your day and you do get reminded, maybe subconsciously, of your childhood experiences, you at least won't have the knee-jerk reaction of immediately seeing black and white, needing to defend that there is really, really some kind of danger that is going to engulf you. So this was kind of the solution for cleaning out the emotional junk and kind of creating that space for intuition to exist and move. However, there are some times when we don't feel ready to go and explore our traumatic environments, traumatic memories or environments, because it's just not the time. And here I do have another solution for you. So I'll go back to my drawing board for a moment. And kind of focus on the highway of these messages. So, how can I will take off all of this junk. Okay. And what I want you to focus on is, as I said, we were talking about intuition. So intuition lies here in spiritual. And to be honest, intuition, you can kind of think of this road that connects soul with our spiritual body and with our physical body and with our physical environment. And the solution that I am proposing here is that we are going to have somebody else use their intuition, their highway, in order to solve your problems in your place. It's kind of like a cheat sheet. What I mean by that is that if I was the person, I would use my intuition and gather information from unconscious that will help me solve your problem in the spiritual realm, which is purpose. Because remember, at least I'm not focusing on problems in the physical realm. I'm really focusing on the problem that you feel right now in the spiritual realm. Lack of purpose, lack of meaning. Why are you here on Earth today? If you can't give a reason why, that means that you don't have this direction or this pull that moves you towards purpose. So what I would do is I would use my intuition and just, instead of asking, what is my purpose? And going through the questions of understanding, what are my interests? What are my skills? What are my talents that I'm born with? Understanding, what problems do I encounter with daily? What are the problems that I find easy to solve? And then also understanding the world part, like the market pain points, the trends, the problems that need to be solved right now and that you can get compensated for. Instead of it all being me focused, I just switch the person that I'm focusing on. I'm going to focus on you. Now, if this brings up a question of maybe A, how can you do that? You're not me. And B, what are you actually providing? Well, I kind of want you to think of us, or let's just say of your environment, as one big whole soup. And this soup has you in there, me in there, your family members in there, your coworkers, the politicians, the animals, the trees, like everything is in there. Because when I talk about spiritual body, I define it as spiritual body so that we can go into nuances, but technically, we all are swimming in one spiritual body, which is the body of soul, which is infinite and cannot be defined. That's why it doesn't really make sense in our mind. We can't really make sense of it unless you have these feelings or these insights that just show the other aspects of our world. But in any case, because we are swimming in one spiritual body, therefore I'm connected to you just like you're connected to me. That's the best way how I can explain it. How come you can use your intuition and gather information about me when you're not me? You don't know my life. You're not in my mind. You know, you don't feel what I feel. You don't think how I think. But I don't need to. Because I am part of that same soup that we all are part, which is termed around as collective unconscious, whatever, this divine kind of cosmos, many words for it. Now, the second one is, well, how are you actually going to help me? How can I actually do this? Well, here I will go into a bit more detail of the two methods that I use. Intuition is the first one. You must have a good intuition, so I also must clean up my highways for intuition. If not, I will have trouble using this. But it is astrology and numerology. These are fancy words, fancy ways of also using intuition. But what they help me is to gather information and categorize information on your talents. Your destined problems, your skills, your interests. So that would be you, centric. So I. And then the other part of it is through astrology, because again, I am connecting to that same soup where we all live. I will identify the market pain point, the collective pain points. Pain. And finally, I'll identify the trends. This is really where I use numerology. What I mean by that is during which period you should apply in this specific field or apply for this specific job, because the economy does not stagnate. There are some periods where, for example, health is a big issue, and there are some periods where something else is of a big issue. And all of this will give me the framework of your destiny. Answer the question of what is my divine mission? So, and now the last caveat that I put on this is when I figure out what your divine mission is on life, is how do I get there? This brings up two nuances. Number one, divine mission or purpose is not one-fold. There are many roles, many opportunities that will be your purpose. So don't get stuck onto one exact idea. And number two, well, you're starting off. What are the practical steps that you have to take in order to at least reach your first milestone? It's very easy to say, okay, for example, my divine mission in life, or one, is to become an entrepreneur. Not an entrepreneur in, for example, in finance, I don't know, or in health. That's great. You have a big goal. That already is step forwards. However, how do you get there? You don't just wake up and have all of these things in your lap. There are steps, there is progress, there is time and effort that needs to be put in order to get there. So essentially, at the end of the day, what I give is a step-by-step guide from your current situation in what you have to do. What jobs do you have to look for? Maybe you need to have, more education. Maybe you need to go and meet these people. Maybe you need to create your own, just start your own startup and see how it goes. So there are a lot of actions that must be taken in order to finally reach your milestone. Now, if I started off this by saying that my goal is to help you feel fulfillment and also pleasure and purpose in life, this doesn't mean that you won't find success in the physical realm. in most cases, you do. But the point being that you really want to focus on feeling purpose instead of seeing purpose with your own eyes. So I guess that was today's presentation. I hope it helped you maybe discover more parts of yourself, talk with yourself, at least maybe it pushed you towards being present. And in any case, in my next presentation, I will be delving into psychic insight, what I was talking about with this intuition, and how come I can do this, but you can't, and how maybe I can help you figure out ways how to do it yourself. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.